Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hey, everybody. I have been thinking about what I wanted to share with you today. You're going to be getting this podcast in the middle of December. And on one hand, for me, this time of year is a time when, at least for me, life just seems really full. We can get really swept up in the traditions and celebrations of this season, and there can feel like there's not really time for much else. But as I was kind of feeling into December, for me, I was also thinking that it's this time of year when we often start to dream about what we might like to do with our lives on the far side of the holidays, when there is a little bit more time and space. And, sometimes we start to dream about certain health goals, like maybe around eating or exercise, or another big one tends to be about productivity or, really taking on certain projects that matter to us. And on one hand, if you've been around here for a while, you kind of probably already know that I'm just not temperamentally a huge New Year's resolution person for a variety of reasons. But I do really relate to this feeling when you're in the holidays of beginning to dream of what's possible for you when there is a little more time and energy and when we can return to the normal flow of life. So I thought that if you're beginning to dream about the new year, if you're beginning to dream about what might be possible then, I thought maybe I would offer a proposal of something that you might dream of something that can be a little different than that kind of standard Protestant work ethic, health and productivity focus that we can all, I think, kind of default to. And something that would, at the same time, I think, significantly improve your year if you implemented it. So that leads me to my proposal. I propose that you start a women's group in 2025. I'm going to say it again. I propose that you start a women's group in 2025. So what's a women's group? I am defining a women's group as a group of women who meets regularly and intentionally to support each other through life. I'm calling this a women's group because it felt like the most general word to describe what this group was that was also explanatory. Like saying just a group or a friend group felt a little too vague to me. But to be clear, I don't think this kind of group has to be just women. It could be an all genders group, maybe an all men's group. A few years ago, my husband actually started something kind of like this with a couple of dads he met, and they called themselves Diner Dads. So if you're not a woman, I hope you do keep listening. I hope the title of this podcast didn't turn you off. Like I said, I kind of just picked women's group because it seemed like the most generic yet descriptive phrasing that I could think of. But you could also call this kind of thing a women's circle or a mastermind or whatever you like. The group that I am personally in calls ourselves Fridays because we meet on Fridays. But for purposes of this podcast, I'm going to be calling it a women's group just to have a word to refer to. Maybe if we make this a thing, can we make this a thing? And we can all come up with a better, more inclusive word to describe it. So as I said, today I want to make my proposal that you might consider starting a women's group in 2025. And I want to propose that starting this women's group might, in fact, be one of the best things you could do in 2025. It might be the thing that brings you the most satisfaction and happiness. And to do that, I want to talk a little bit about my own women's group. As I said, I'm in a women's group. We've actually been meeting monthly for just about 5 years. We started in January of 2020, which is crazy that it's been so long. But it's been a really satisfying part of my life and social life in this time. I think having a group of folks that have tracked you through a bunch of different seasons of life, who kind of know all the threads of all that I've struggled with over those 5 years of my triumphs and celebrations in career and family and health and everything else. That feels really good. And it also feels really, really good to track other people, again, through all their challenges and triumphs, to know that triumphs really mean something because we've seen the struggles too. It feels really good. Of course, I do have other friends, one-on-one relationships who've known me a long time, and even some groups of friends who've known me a long time, like my, college friend text chain. But it just feels really different to have a group of in-person friends who you can all roll into someone's living room on a Friday afternoon in sweatpants and eat cheese and and crackers and sit on the floor or a cozy couch and just like download about your life, which is what this group is to me. That's what we literally all did last Friday. And I've said it before, but I really have found that in person is so important and distinct from sort of just having, maybe dispersed geographically virtual groups that many of us are a part of these days. And I think a lot of us don't have as many of those in-person groups as we used to, perhaps like in younger season of our lives. I know I didn't. And I know also that just much more generally, a lot of us are craving not just more connection, but deeper group connection, which doesn't always arise organically, at least in the season of life that I'm in. So that's my motivation for sharing just a little bit more about this group. So I wanted to share today about why I started this group, how I started this group, and how we run our meetings, and a bit about what I think works well for us, about our format and how we run the group. I'm going to get into some pretty specific logistics for two reasons. First of all, I personally love specificity. I love kind of knowing the behind the scenes. And second of all, because the generics of this group, the sort of general details are actually pretty simple. We meet once a month. That's kind of it. It's women. So if that's all you need, then, you could stop here. You've got all you need. But if you like knowing the behind the scenes, let's keep going. So as I said, I'm starting off a little bit with my own story. I started this women's group. We call ourselves Fridays because we meet on Fridays in January of 2020. When I started this group, I was in a season where I think I'd been living in LA for like a year and a half, and I honestly didn't have that many friends. There'd been a lot going on. Gil and I had like moved cross country from North Carolina. We'd lived in a bunch of different places. We lived with my parents, and we got an apartment, then we bought a house. Then the house needed a lot of stuff fixed about it. So there was a lot of going on. Oh, we got married in that time. But finally, kind of things were settling down, and the reality remained that I didn't really have that many friends in LA, and so, I had started to join some activities finally, and I had started to make some friends, and I had started to finally see them regularly one-on-one, which I think I've talked about in other podcasts. And I love that. It was like so good to just like finally have some friends, but I was also craving some kind of group connection. And I was reading Shasta Nelson's book, which is called Friendships Don't Just Happen, The Guide to Creating a Meaningful Circle of Girlfriends. If you've listened to some of my other podcasts about friendship, you know that I really like her work on friendship. And she writes in this book about this women's circle that she started. She sort of mentions it casually, like, oh yeah, my women's circle, and how this women's circle would meet regularly and share about themselves and support each other. And I was like, yes, I want that. I want a women's circle. Sign me up. So I thought how am I going to get one? So I just thought of a couple of different women that I knew. And this was actually a particularly nice situation because they did happen to know each other. And though for the record, I don't think that all those people have to know each other, or that you even have to know 3 people to start a women's group. I think even if you only know 1 or 2 people, you could just like invite those 1 or 2 people, and they could invite 1 or 2 other people. But for me, I happen to know 3 people. We happened to have all met at this kind of, well, it's not kind of, it was a feminist accountability group that we all did, which was this activity that I'd kind of signed up for in my quest to make some new friends. So I knew these 3 people, and I kind of pitched the idea to each of them individually, separately. And my pitch to them was, let's meet once a month for 2 hours, and we can kind of support each other about work and life stuff. And this particular set of women all worked for themselves at the time. They all were either kind of solopreneurs, or they had very small businesses. So they all had a bit of flexibility, and it all just worked for all of us to meet kind of late on Friday afternoons, like that 4 to 6 time. So that's how it all came to be. Basically, I just heard about these things called women's circles, and I wanted one. So I pitched it to a few women I knew. And again, we could just stop the podcast there. That's the high level of it all. But I personally always love more details. So I want to talk next about how we run our group, just in case that's helpful for you. Because I know I personally always like examples of how people do things. So before I get into the details, I will just say, I'm going to share what we do, but this format has taken a while to emerge. I think the first time we ran it, I was just sort of like, what are we going to do? I planned like a bunch of different writing prompts, all these things to do. And ultimately, we didn't really need that much structure. But we did find that having some amount of structure was nice. It kind of let us all kind of relax into it, go a little deeper. And over time, we've evolved to a pretty set structure that seems to work really well for us. So logistics-wise, like I said, we have this 2-hour meeting once a month on Fridays in the late afternoons. We do send out all the calendar invites like months in advance, which is just something that I love about this group. It's just a very nice group of organized folks. We do alternate the house of the person that we meet at. So the person whose house we meet at typically like provide some snacks, and we call them the Sergeant at Arms, which is a fun title, which I came up with and my friends were willing to indulge me in. But really it just means that they're the timekeeper and they kind of like stage manage everything. They kind of keep things running along, which I think is really nice in a group like this. I find that everybody else gets to just kind of relax because we know that someone is responsible for like keeping a little bit of structure. So we just like chat as everyone arrives. And then once we're there and settled, we have like 2 main parts in the meeting. So one of them is we have this like short kickoff question that everyone answers. So the Sergeant at Arms also picks that question. That's another one of their jobs. And the kickoff question is often something kind of like fun and silly, like, you know, where would you buy a pied-à-terre if you could buy a pied-à-terre anywhere? Or, you know, what era of history would you live in if you could live at any point in time? So it could be fun and silly, or sometimes it's much deeper, like, you know, what do you want to leave behind as we enter 2024? Or, you know, what do you know is working in your life right now? So each answer, it's just like, you know, a phrase or a sentence or something. And that's a nice kickoff because then everyone gets a chance to share. And then we use those answers to determine the order that we go in for the rest of our time together. These are just so nitty gritty, but it does make a difference. Like before we added that element, you know, it kept being like, everyone's like, no, you go next, you go next. And it just ended up being really nice to be like, no, here's the order we're going in. We typically just go in alphabetical order based on the answers to that kickoff question, though sometimes we go in reverse alphabetical order. But that then in turn leads us to the main part of our time together. And in that main part of time, each person gets a chance to share and ask the group for support on an issue of their choice. So a Sergeant of Arms kind of like divides up the rest of the time. We each usually get about 15 to 20 minutes. And then within that, you know, Sergeant at Arms is doing the timekeeping. So they'll give everyone like a 5-minute warning because sometimes you're in the flow and it's nice to know what's going on. And when it's your time, you can use it really for whatever you want. The most typical thing is to ask the group for advice on something. Sometimes it's like professionally oriented, like, you know, I want to ask for a raise in this way. What do you think? Or I was going to do this marketing campaign. What do you think? But just as often, it's something personal. I think at the last meeting, you know, somebody asked whether anyone had a good OBGYN recommendation, or like I literally once asked if anybody had like good ideas for like very quick weeknight dinners. And we just spent like, you know, that 15 to 20 minutes just hearing what everybody does when they need to have a quick dinner. And that was actually really helpful for me. I got like new ideas. And if you don't have a question from the group, you can just give an update. And at this point, that's what a lot of us do. And these updates typically get pretty deep and pretty honest. We've just been with each other through pregnancies and infertility and a parent with Alzheimer's and sick kids and really difficult bosses, and also, you know, big, exciting new projects and jobs and weddings and all kinds of things in between. It can be just really nice, like I said, to have this group of people who has tracked you over the years to kind of download to. And honestly, that's it. Like I said, we do this kickoff question, we all answer it, and then everyone gets 15 or 20 minutes to kind of ask a question to the group or share an update. It's a simple structure, but it's also nice because, like I said, I think having a little bit of structure invites us to kind of go deeper, and it also makes the group feel balanced. It feels like everybody gets a bit of time to kind of be at the center of things. So that's what I had to share about how we run our meetings. And then I also wanted to share my perspective on 5 things that I think work really well for us, and one thing that totally selfishly works really well for me. That'll be the last thing I share to close this out. So first, the 5 things that I think work really well for us as a group. So the first thing is that we meet once a month. That's the first thing that I think works well for us. I haven't mentioned this yet, but when I initially pitched this group, you know, to the initial people who joined us, one of the women I pitched it to said to me, "Oh, that's such a great idea, but let's meet once a week, not once a month. Let's really get a lot done together." And I was like, you know what? I can't commit to once a week. For me, at least in the season of life that I'm in, once a month is perfect. More than that would be just like too much of a commitment. And then less, obviously, it's harder to track each other through all the seasons of life. And I personally think that because it wasn't so often, you know, once a month is really doable, it's been easier for everyone to commit to over the span of the years. But like I said, less often than that, I think we wouldn't have kind of felt as embedded in each other's lives. So that's the first thing I think works well for us, meeting once a month. The second thing that I would think works really well for us is having a set format. I think, like I said, having a little bit of a structure does help us connect a little more deeply. We get to know each other through the group questions at the beginning, and then you kind of have to, either ask for help or give the group an update, which again, typically goes, pretty deep. The third thing that I think works really well for us is maintaining a minimum number of members. So, about a year in, one of the women who was in the group at the time, her priority shifted and she chose to leave the group, which is totally fine. I did, and I still wish her all the best. And the other two women and I at the time discussed it, and we decided that having, at least 4 people felt like a really nice number to us. So we invited someone new to join. And I remember being a little nervous at the time because the rest of us did know each other so well already. And, would it be weird to add someone new? But I'm really glad we did. We actually have added some other new members over time. We added a 5th member kind of maybe 2 years ago because sometimes folks are out of town and it's nice to have at least 4 people. And then someone else, her schedule shifted a lot and sort of capacity changed, and she left more recently. So we added yet another new member. So we've had, several new additions and shifts over the years, and I've been a little nervous each time, but we've always discussed it, really intentionally and thoughtfully as a group. And we always invite that person to visit, like kind of a group date before formally inviting them. And luckily, fingers crossed, has always worked out really well for us. So I'm particularly thoughtful about this because my husband started his own group, which I kind of mentioned at the beginning, like maybe 3 years ago, of dads who would kind of meet for dinner on Wednesday nights. They were the diner dads. And over time, they lost some members, for various reasons, because that happens. That's life. That happened in my group too. People move, people change jobs, all that. But the group didn't add anyone new. And eventually it kind of like fizzled out. Again, not as a, doesn't mean anything was bad about the people who were made. It's just like, priorities change. So my personal, obviously biased opinion is that it can be good to kind of add new members over time. So that's the third thing that I think has worked well for us. We have added people over time as necessary. The fourth thing that I think works really well for us is that we are not too big, but not too small. That's just my personal feeling on it. But like I said, we have 5 people now. And I think that 4 to 5 people per meeting lets each person take quite a bit of time to share or ask a question to the group. You kind of like have that spotlight, but still has a nice small group feel. So I personally really like this size. We may add one more because one or 2 people are sometimes traveling or like busy, but I don't think we would grow beyond that. So that's the fourth thing I think works well. And then the final 5th thing that I think works really well is that we are very thoughtful about who joins. So there's 2 qualities that we have in this group that everyone in this group has. One is that, by the way, I wonder, it's so funny. Real talk, one of my children is screaming downstairs. So I wonder if you can hear that. Are we living this life? Okay, I'm going to start again. But if you hear that, they're okay. It's probably just a toddler being very frustrated. Okay, so the 5th thing is we are very thoughtful about who joins. There's 2 qualities that everyone in this group has. One is that they are highly conscientious women. They are organized. They come when they say they'll come. They have a bit of, they like a bit of organization in their lives. I didn't like consciously choose that when I initiated with this group, but it kind of just happened this way. But oh my gosh, I love it. One woman in this group who's a friend of mine, she just like took over scheduling. She's just very organized. She just took it over. And when people are the sergeant at arms, again, they like really take it on. And I myself am very organized and conscientious in general, but I don't really like feeling like I have to kind of shoulder the entire organization or leadership of the group. And I have personally just loved being in a group of other women where everybody has that quality at least a bit. And also, totally practically, I have noticed that especially as I've hit my 30s and especially in LA, I don't know if it's this life season, I don't know if it's LA, but man, can people get flaky? But this crew is not a flaky crew. And if you're going to have a small group of people, you need a group of people who are going to show up when they say they'll show up and kind of make this commitment to each other. So that's one quality that I think kind of like everybody in this group has. I think they're pretty organized. And the second one that I think has ended up being really important is that there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence in everyone in this group. Everyone comes to that like a little differently, but we don't shy away from deeper topics that are really close to our hearts and kind of like talking about what matters most. And that's really important to me personally. So those are the 5 things that I think work really well in this group. And then, like I said, there is one thing that I think worked well, totally selfishly for me. And that is starting the group myself worked out totally selfishly for me. Like I mentioned, I was the one who initiated this group. And as a result, I was able from the beginning to put it together in a way that worked for me. I didn't have the bandwidth to meet weekly, so I had us meet monthly. I got to choose people that I liked to be in the group. And I just mentioned this because, and I think I've mentioned this before about friendship, and this is true even for me, I think there can be a little bit of shame about sometimes being the organizer or the instigator. Like if I was really popular, if people really liked me, if people wanted to hang out with me, if I was really social, I wouldn't have to organize this group. I'd be invited to a group like this. But I'm here to say, it ended up being really nice that I organized the group. So I just want to offer you that thought to think yourself, if you want it, that it can be totally selfishly a great advantage to you to get to organize the group. So those are the things that I think worked out really well for the group and worked out really well for me. So that's my episode. Like I said, my main goal in doing this episode was the hope that it inspires even one more person to go and organize a group. Create your own Fridays, which is the name of my group, or Saturdays or Tuesdays. Call it whatever you like. As I said, it's been really nourishing to me to have this group of people who I get to see in person in my sweatpants and who are just tracking what I'm up to throughout my life and who I can ask like really important and also really dumb questions of. And I wish that all of you would have the same kind of group and support if you want it. And I hope it gives you some inspiration, to go and start a group of your own. I think, like I said, so much of our focus in the new year can be on things like health and productivity, these things that have maybe more shiny outer results. But I think having a richer, deeper support system can make such a difference in our lives. I know it has for me. And again, like I said just a minute ago, I also want to remind you that even if it doesn't happen, naturally, if it doesn't quote unquote just happen, you can make it happen. And that does not have to be a bad thing. It would be such a blessing for your 2025 and for all who you include in that circle. So happy holidays, everyone. I'm rooting for you. You got this. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.